My name's Nat Myers. I'm here at the Memphis Listening Lab, listening to some records. I found a couple. I take no credit for the first one because Jim just had them laid out for me. But Fred McDowell, I actually don't know what the album's called. Just I do not play no rock and roll. One of his more famous quotes. I think it ain't the particular album so much, but some of the songs on this track, like Kokomo Baby and Baby Please Don't Go is 61 Highway. It don't got none of his John Henry, but I remember watching I think they're the Seattle Folkway recordings of Fred McDowell. I don't know, probably about 10 years ago on YouTube. And I remember just listening to John Henry and the way he played on that guitar, and I was just like, if I could play half as good as that, like I'll have got somewhere, you know what I mean, when it comes to playing the music. And so he was just very inspirational to me, especially when it comes to slide pieces. It's funny, I was over at Folk Alliance, and I can't believe I'm telling the story without remembering this gal's name, but she's one of the preeminent folk musicians out of England, and she had been good friends with Alan Lomax, so she came to America to do a lot of the field kind of scouting research trips that he would take in the Deep South into particular niches in the country. And she was telling this story about when they were down in Mississippi, they were recording another fellow, and they asked him if he knew anybody around who played blues, and this fellow mentioned that there was a farmer named Fred McDowell who played some music, and that they go, you know, he'd reach out and see if Fred would be interested in coming by. And I think like a couple days later or something, in the evening, Fred walked out of the woods and they started recording him, and the first track she said he recorded was Highway 61. And she said that Lomax kept a ledger of all of the recordings that he had, and so he could keep notes on each particular recording. And she said she saw him do something he'd never done before, which was write one word. And he just wrote perfect, which I always thought was like a pretty dope fucking story. So, yeah, I don't know. The other ones, I opened for this fellow named G Love. Maybe you heard of him. Yeah. And so I have to rep some Philadelphia, Mississippi. This record I think it got nominated for an Independent Music Award for Best Blues Album this past year. Got swiped on the Grammys, but fuck the Grammys. I'm joshing. But yeah, the producer on I didn't mean it. The Chuck Treese, who's also G's drummer, produced this record. I think for 35 shows, I did kind of backup accompaniment guitar for Guitar Man on this record, which is originally played with Kingfish. And I always thought it's such a sick song. Listening to and being able to play a little bit on it with him was definitely a dream come true. I also like this album too because G's just definitely got his ear to who's making the sound right now and who's making it real good. Some of his collaborators are like people who collaborate with me on my album, like Alvin Youngblood Hart. There's other cats. I think R.L. Boyce is on the new Tell Everybody piece by Easy Eye Sound coming out. So he's just, you know, he went down into, and John Tavis Willis, if you haven't heard of John Tavis Willis, I mean, dude's an absolute powerhouse, phenomenal singer and player, and he's a youngin' too. Anyway, so I picked that one because of that. And I picked Furry because Furry's got a lot of influence, especially on my more rambly pieces. I always admire his slide. I feel like each musician is like their style's peculiar to themselves, but Furry's is like extra peculiar to himself. Like you don't really see people play the style he does in the way he does. Yeah, and just some of his really like more famous pieces like Cassie Jones or Big Chief Blues, his John Henry, Turn Your Money Green. I mean, there's just so many of them that I used to listen to, like the old 78 takes on them. So I picked that out just because Cassie Jones in particular, one of my favorite songs on the new album is called 7571, and that's very much based off Furry Lewis's Train piece. Cassie Jones. I think I actually met this fellow named, I know this fellow named Don Flemings. Just I mean, he's another powerhouse of the music, you know, a real songster, musicianer, and he was talking about how, you know, going to these like trying to get people turned on to the old music, younger folks turned on to the old music. And one of the things that he always kind of looks as an in was Cassie Jones by Furry, because it's kind of like this proto-rap ramble that he's singing. It's so long, it's got a part one and part two. It's just such a really cool song, and I'm just trying to emulate it more and more as I can in my own plan. And I picked out the Big Goat, some RL, because again, I used to, you know, I mentioned to you, Mark, I'm a little too poor for the 78, so what I wind up doing is sort of like jerry-rigged deep blues hunting online, and I found myself on the Lomax page on YouTube, and I remember hearing his Jumper on the Line for the first time, and like a lot of folks, I was like, what the fuck is this, you know? And so I went down a deep rabbit hole. I really like RL stuff. In terms of the legacy, you see a lot of people doing like his more traditional covers, like Long Hair Donnie or Poor Black Maddie. But Cedric Burnside, I think his grandson, Cedric Burnside on his album I Be Trying, which won the Grammy 2 years ago, right? Was it 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, on I Be Trying, he actually has a cover of RL's first recorded song called Birds of a Feather. And I always thought that was like a really good throwback, and also sort of like, yo, you gotta be deep into some RL to know, like, it was just a really good homage to pay him. So I had to pick this fella. And who else do I got down here? Oh, some John Hurt. I basically just went down one line of the Fat Possums at Jim's advising. But again, I think Mississippi John Hurt, another person I talked with Don Flemings about, especially in terms of his accessibility. There's something about John Hurt's playing, his own sense of like who he was as a person, really kind of shining through in his songs, and all of it's appealing. And you want to learn how he plays his songs. His Avalon Blues, or his Blue Harvest Blues, I think that's probably my favorite song by him. His Spike Driver Blues. There's just so many names. So yeah, I had to pick me some Hurt. I think Hurt's story is interesting too. I want to hear. You always hear the narrative of like some folk archivists like listening to Avalon Blues, being like, "Where the fuck is this place? Who the fuck is this guy?" And going down there and like scouting him out, and hooray, like here he is. You know, he's still living down there. It's like a folk archivist like daydream, you know. And simultaneously, it's like I'd love to hear that story from Hurt's perspective in terms of like he wasn't just waiting to get found again, you know. Anyway, so those are the little cuts I got here. Thanks to Jim.